Hello, everyone. Welcome to Purpose YouTube. My name is Dusty Small, and I'm the lead pastor here at Purpose Church. As many of you know, Purpose Church is a brand new church located right in the heart of Bossier City, Louisiana. We're so glad you're here to watch today's message. Before we get started, would you comment there in the chat section? Let us know your name and where you're watching from. Let me know what you're believing God for right now in your life and how I can pray for you. And one last thing, as God begins to speak to you through this message, would you comment there in the chat section? Let us know what God's speaking to you about. I love to go back and see how God's moving in your life. We hope today's message will encourage you and your family. But we started our series last week. You might remember what the series was titled, Scriptures to Live By. That's right. I am giving you some scriptures that I think every one of us should live by. Last week I talked about the word of God that was given to Joshua. And we talked about how it was so important that the mission God had called Joshua to, that he would get into the word. And I think that God has great things in front of you. I told the church this morning, and Lord, don't do anything that I don't know about. But I said, even if he calls me into eternity this year, the best is still yet to come. The best is ahead of me because I'm living for eternity, right? I'm driven by eternity that way. And so the best is ahead of us, right? And so I'm encouraging you that as we launch into this new season, not deviating from God's word is our calling for this year. So scriptures to live by. We're going to have a theme verse as we get into this, but I'm going to build this morning's message around a word called stress. How many of you deal with some stress? How many got some stress in your life? How many of you walked in here with some stress, right? How many of you are just stressed? You're always stressed. Come on, don't lie in church. Come on, get real. How many of you got some stress in your life? How many of you got some people that stress you? How many of you got some problems that stress you, right? Why is it, though, that we're always stressed? I'll tell you why, because it's always something. It's always something. I mean, you get one tire fixed, and then you got to fix the next one. Air conditioner goes out, then it's the washing machine. It just seems like I get one kid fixed, and then it's the next one. It's just something, you know? Not that, some of you still trying to fix your spouse, right? And that ain't going to happen. But, you're trying to fix stuff, you know? You're trying to fix a coworker. You're trying to fix your boss, trying to fix your church. You get me, though. We deal with problems, right? And whether you know it or not, you're either in a problem, you're coming out of a problem, or you're going into a problem. And I know you're like, Pastor, it's New Year. Come on, be more positive. Well, I am positive. I'm positive that you're going to go through some problems this year. I'm 100% positive you're going to go through some of this. You know, it reminds me of a story when we start thinking about some of the good and the bad and the good news and the bad news. And there just is. You know the Bible has good news in it, right? How many know it's got some bad news in there too? Yeah, well, it reminds me of a story about Uncle Jerry. Uncle Jerry, he went up to the doctor. Hadn't been to the doctor in a while, but he felt like some stuff was going wrong in his life. He goes up to the doctor, and the doctor does his all little checks, and the doctor's like, I got some good news, Jerry, and I got some bad news. Jerry's like, all right, give me some good news. He goes, well, you only got 24 hours to live. And Jerry's like, what in the world? That's good news? I can't even imagine what the bad news is to be. Well, give me the bad news, Doc. He said, well, I tried to call you yesterday, and you didn't answer. Good news and bad news. The Bible has some for us, and I'm going to set it up. This isn't our theme verse, but just hang with me until I get us there. John 16:33 has some good news and some bad news in it. And Jesus said, I've told you all of this so that you may have peace in me. Now watch this, because we're going to thrive in 2025. All of us, I know you're going to see it. All the pastors and churches, I'm messing, I'm joking, picking this morning, because in 2020 we all had vision. Every church had new vision. Come on, I'm playing. I like to pick on pastors because I'm one of them. But here on earth, watch this. Here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows. Notice it didn't just say, how many trials and sorrows are you going to have? Many. Now, I know that you signed up in 2024 or you unsubscribed from the trials and tribulations packages. I know. You like unsubscribed for it. You're like, I didn't want any. And you're trying to do the same thing in 2025. But Jesus is telling us this morning the bad news. In this life here on earth, you're going to have some problems. Many troubles and trials and sorrows. But here's the good news. Take heart. He said, I have overcome the world. And that's good news. So even Jesus is telling us that as you start to deal with the things that stress us, right, there's going to be some good things and some bad things, but take heart. I've overcome the world. So the bad news is this, church. The bad news is that the pressures of life are never going to go away. You're never going to have, it's never going to get less. In fact, the more you learn how to handle certain stresses, they're going to increase. The problems don't get less, they get more. And so if you want more in your life, just know that there's going to be more troubles that come your way. What do we say? We pastors like to say new levels, new devils. Come on, you know what I'm saying? Like, come on, all the phrases. But the good news is this: you can increase your capacity to handle stress. Bad news is you're going to deal with it. The good news is you can increase your capacity. Say increase it. Because you can. You can increase things. You can get better at handling it so it doesn't have to handle you. I want to define it before I get to my theme verse, so hang with me. The pressure, when I think about stress, what I'm saying is that it's the pressure of life gets greater than my capacity basically to handle it. How many of you know that little light on your dashboard that lights up? It's called the check engine light. Why does the check engine, who hates that thing, right, by the way? Especially when you got to go get a car inspection. You hate that thing, right? Stupid thing. I had a vehicle one time, we couldn't get it off. It just seemed like it was one code after another, right? And but why? The light comes on, why? To tell you that something's not right. And when I begin to experience stress that's beginning to become overwhelming to me, it's telling me that my capacity to handle it isn't there yet. Because it's doing something to me. So that's an indicator that I need to increase my capacity to handle what's happening around me. Now, there is a difference between stress and anxiety. Stress deals more with the externals. It's the problems in life. It's everything that's going on around me. But I don't have to let it get in me. When I deal with my anxiety, sometimes it's a fear that's coming from within, right? Yes, it's tied to things around me. But when I'm talking about stress this morning, it's more about what's happening around us. And how many of you know there's a lot of stuff happening around us? And so if you caught last week's message, you know that Chantal and I have a theme for this year. We're saying, Lord, give us more skills, not less problems. I'm asking God, give me more skills. Train me for battle. Prepare me, right? What did Solomon pray? Who the Bible says was the wisest man of all the time, right? He said, Lord, give me wisdom and understanding to lead your people. And when he asked that, he knew, or God knew that he had the right mind because he knew what he was going to have to deal with. There was going to be situations where two women would come and bring a baby, and they're both fighting over the baby. Whose baby is it? Right? He needed wisdom in the moment to know how to lead people. So God, help me to lead more people because we got to reach more people. Give me more skills, not less problems. It's unfortunate. The more people we reach, the more problems we got to deal with. So I need more skills. You need more skills to be able to deal with what God is calling you to deal with. But many of you are stuck. Many of you are stuck right where you're at right now, and you're not leveling up because you're stuck in the place that you're at. And one of the reasons, not saying it's everything, but one of the reasons why you're stuck and you're not moving to the next level, you've plateaued or you're mediocre in that sense or that area, is because you're not learning how to handle the stress. When the stress comes, you get stuck. When stress hits us this way, you get overwhelmed by the external pressures, and then here's what happens. You shut down, and then you break down. Watch it. So whenever the check engine light comes on, if you continue to ignore the check engine light or the stress, what happens? Eventually, if you don't deal with it, it might shut down or break down, right? You get the little tire pressure on there. If you don't deal with that, eventually it's going to be flat, and you're going to be on the side of the road watching everybody drive by, wondering how I got here. Friend, you got there because you didn't do something about the light. So when the stresses come, we've got to deal with it. But here's what else we do. We will isolate or we will run away. Right? Oh, there's a lot of problems in that church, or there's a lot of problems at this workplace, or there's a lot of problems in my marriage, or I got a lot of problems. And so we isolate ourselves. We push everybody out because I don't want to deal with that, or I run away from it thinking that I can run away from all my problems. We think we can move to another city. We think we can move to another town. We think we can move to another school. We think we can move to another job. But we don't realize that you can live on an island by yourself and still have problems. Problems are everywhere. You've got to deal with problems. You got to learn how to do it. And so we're stuck or we've plateaued because when the pressure comes, we don't allow it to make diamonds, if you will, right? But we give in, we give up, we run away. And instead of leaning into it, and I'm setting us up for where I'm going to take us this morning with our theme verse, instead of leaning into it and then allowing God to lift us to the place. Look, this is the way the Bible teaches us. When you're faithful in the little things, He'll what? He'll make you a ruler over many. If you want to get to step 5 and thrive in 2025, you got to work through steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. But often we want 5 without 1, 2, 3, and 4. We like shortcuts, right? But I'll tell you this, shortcuts short circuit your long-term success. See, most people want what you got, and that's not how you got it. Right? That's how it works. And then what happens is when we see something you have that I don't have, then we become critical, we become judgmental, and we start to point fingers, we try to discredit. So people want what you have, just not how you got it. And I had to deal with some things. I had to get up earlier. I had to stay up later, right? I had to go through this class. I had to go through that class. I had to go through the class of problems and trials and troubles and learn how to handle these things for God to elevate me. And if you want to get to the place, right, your boss, if you're working for someone, needs to know that you can handle these things before he's going to put you up to those things. And when you get to those things, there's more people to deal with, more problems to deal with. You're working with me this morning. So it's very practical. It's very spiritual in this sense because God has called you to lead. God has called you to lead the way. You are called to be what the Bible says, the light of the world. You are a city on a hill. You were called to do these things. Look, he tried. I mean, some of you might think you're foolish, but God chose the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. If you'll learn these principles this morning, you will begin to, come on, somebody say it with me, thrive in 2025. All right, I'm done with it. I probably won't say it again. I'm over it, right? I'm so over it. It's only January what? What's the number? I'm messing. All right, Philippians 4:13. How many of you know it? How many of you can quote it? How many of you have it on a Bible, on a coffee cup? How many of you have it on something on the wall? What am I trying to say here? Whatever, something on the wall, right? Decoration. I can think of 5 and thriving, but I can't think of what's on the wall, right? Like, okay, let's say it. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. How many things can you do through Christ? Right? Okay. Now, I got to set this up because does that mean that I can go into the gym this afternoon and bench press 500 pounds because he said I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me? No. No. Does that mean I can climb to the top of the church and jump off and fly today because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me? No. Right? No, but some people, right, when we get to be foolish, we think we can do things without the work that it takes to get there, right? Satan comes to Jesus, takes him out to the edge of the cliff and says, hey, throw yourself off. The angels have come. He's like, no, dummy, I'm not that stupid, right? I'm not going to test the Lord. Just because I can do all things through Christ doesn't mean that I can do those things, right? You play stupid games, you win what? Stupid prizes, right? So I'm just saying, but there are things that like when you train for it though, right? We don't start out running marathons, so we train for those things. But if you want to put in the work, you can get there, all right? So now I want to contextually set up this because so many of us, this is one of the most misquoted Bible verses of all times when it comes to this because we think we can just do whatever. And God will do it. So Paul was one who went through many troubles and trials and challenges. The Bible will describe it as missionary journeys. How many of you heard of that? He went on mission. He had the first missionary journey, the second missionary, the third missionary journey. When he did that, he was out planting churches. Paul was a church planter like we are here at Purpose Church. He would establish a church, but along the way, he ran into a lot of challenges. He ran into a lot of problems. There were times when he was moving by sea, he'd be shipwrecked. There was times when he was betrayed and talked about behind his back. There was times when he was in Lystra, he was stoned, and the next day he gets up and goes to the Derby, not the Derby, but you know what I'm saying there. And so Paul went through problems and challenges and trials. In fact, did you know that there are 4 letters that Paul wrote that are considered to be prison epistles? And so the letter to the church at Philippi was one he wrote from prison. So what you just read, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, Paul wrote that when he was in prison. There's something else. He also got a call, or he had a vision, a dream at night of someone over in Macedonia. You'll read about that in the book of Acts. The Bible tells us that he had dreams, somebody reaching out, hey, come help us. On his way over there, he runs into problems. Imagine getting a word from God, going to do what God has called you to do, and immediately you are met with problems. Right? God called us to plant a church. We had a problem. Where? Where are we going to meet at? How are we going to do this? We don't have any money. Well, lots of problems can go and make you think that, hey, maybe this isn't what it was. He goes over there. There's this slave girl that was demonically possessed. She was harassing him, following him around everywhere that he would go, saying all these things. Eventually, Paul gets tired of it. He turns around, rebukes it, casts the devil out of her, and then immediately her owners get all worked up about it, and then they have him arrested. He is physically beaten. Now, you don't have to raise your hands, but how many of you went to school, because you're going to tell on yourself, whenever they used to do spankings back in school, right? You don't have to tell on yourself. I told you don't have to raise your hands. But I will say this, how many of you got, no, I'm just... But imagine in our culture today where you could be doing something and then the authorities of the day would beat you like he was beaten. Not only was he beaten, he was put into the jail. How many of you remember the story of Paul and Silas? What was Paul and Silas? It was late in the midnight hour. They were in the deep, dark dungeon with shackles on their feet and fetters on their hands, right? And they were in a cold, dark, dingy place. And so Paul had problems. You're tracking with me. And so he's writing about dealing with problems. Now, I want you to understand that context is always king. If you come to Purpose Church, you're going to get the Bible. So we just read Philippians 4:13. Now let's look at the verse before it so I can set all of this up and you get your Bible, and I'm going to give you 6 points, and then we're going to let Jesus move in our life. Here it is. Verse 12. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. Can I set that up for you a little bit? You might not feel like you have enough. Paul said, I learned how to do it when I had almost nothing. Paul said, I learned how to do it when I had everything. Now watch, it goes further. I've learned the secret of living in how many situations? Every situation. Look, I know some of you feel like that the devil handcrafted the problem for you. And maybe he did. Maybe you were so lucky that the one devil that works in the whole world found you today and he handcrafted this for you. I'm not saying he didn't. I'm just telling you what the Bible says. That I've learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it's handcrafted, whether it was sent straight from hell, whether this or that or whatever, right? Paul said, I learned the secret in every situation, whether it, watch this now. He says, whether I had a full stomach, an empty stomach, whether I had plenty or little. What's he really saying here? In the good and the bad, I learned that the secret was this. Now, let's say it. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. The secret was that when he faced moments when I had nothing or I had moments when I had everything, the secret lied in allowing Jesus to strengthen me. But some of you think you're a bunch of pack mules and you pride yourself in packing around problems and packing around trials and packing them around. And you're like, I'm going through this and I'm going through that. And you want to tell everybody and you post it on your Facebook page and you post it on your Instagram page and you tweet about it and you call your neighbor about it, right? I'm just setting you up. Come on. Hey, if you're new and I do this, because I'm going to do it here in just a second, I tell you to pull your toes back. It's because I say something that might feel like it's going to offend you. I just don't want you to get offended around here. So it's a joke. Then I say pull your toes back, right? So pull your toes back. You know what I'm saying? That's what we do. But what I'm saying here to us is that in every situation, no matter what you're facing this year, Jesus told us that in this side of eternity, you're going to have many problems, trials, and sorrows, and all the things that come on along with it. But Paul would tell us this morning that I learned that I can't control everything around me. Husbands and wives, you can't control each other. Moms, dads, you can't control everything your kids do. You're going to try, and you're going to want to, and you're going to want to fix them, and you're going to want to fix her, and you're going to want to fix him, and you're going to want to fix you're going to fix it all, right? But I want to tell you that when we're dealing with stress, Paul's telling us this morning that I learned I can't control everything around me. I can be doing the right thing and the wrong thing happen. I can be listening to God, doing what God told me, and problems meet me at the door. I haven't even got out of the house yet on the way to church, and you're already in my ear. Had that coffee, had that nice white blouse on, and you spilled your coffee all over the floor, all over your shoes. Come on, somebody. But here's what he did learn, right, is that he could choose his response. I can't control what the world does around me. I can only choose how I respond to it. And I think if you'll get that, that'll bring some freedom to some of us this morning. So I want to talk to you about something I learned years ago from a pastor who was going through just an extremely difficult time. Back in 2013, his son had committed suicide. Many of you will be familiar with the guy, Rick Warren. He wrote The Purpose-Driven Life. But there's something I learned from him back years ago, and I've just kind of adapted some of those things and put this together. I think there are 6 responses that we have to stress. And I think when we learn those responses, I think we can see how we can better our life and develop more skills to handle the problems that we experience. And so those 6 responses that we have to stress are always shock. Then there's going to be sorrow. You're going to struggle. There's going to be a moment of struggle, right? The shock is, I can't believe this happened to me, right? The sorrow is like you almost become deeply depressed, depending on how severe the nature of it is. You struggle with it. You're asking why. Why did this have to happen to me, right? You're dealing with this. And then as you get a little further into it, then there's this moment when shift happens. And every one of us have an opportunity to surrender. You can surrender to God's way. It's raining. I don't know if you can hear that. Trying to distract you while I could get a drink. Then there's a sanctification process. That's where God begins to work in me. And then the service part of it is where I begin to allow God to work through me. God doesn't just save you and sit you up on a shelf to be like, oh, wow, look at that. No, he saves us and sends us. And so God does something in us to do a work through us, but the work always comes in us before through us. You got to get the message and then go give the message. So let's break it down. Let's dig into it. I'm going to move quickly through this. So for you note takers, if I go too fast for you this morning, you can go back and watch it a second time on our YouTube channel. Shock. Can't believe it happened to me. I can't believe they did this to me. I can't believe they said that to me. I can't believe it happened again. Now is just not the time for this. Right? I'm saving for vacation. Now's not the time for this to happen. Right? I mean, I'm trying to get where I want to be, or it could be something that's really hard and maybe heavier, and this news is devastating. This news is overwhelming. And we can have something that begins to really stress us and weigh us down that way. And here's something that I like to remind you of very frequently. Now, I talked about it in last week's message, so I'm not going to talk as deeply about it this morning, but whenever we start to stress, we will isolate. And in the moment where there was a transition, I'm going to take you back there for last week's message. Moses was the primary leader for God's people, but Joshua was his right-hand man. And there was a moment when Moses had passed away, and now Joshua was going to be the leader. Joshua was mourning. God comes to Joshua and says, basically, in my own little, if you let me paraphrase, get your butt up, it's time to go. You can't stay on this side of the Jordan River. I've got something that's better for you ahead. So you can't stay here. Like, you've gone through something, the pain was bad, it was overwhelming, but you can't stay there. You're angry, don't stay there. You're frustrated, don't stay there. Right? You can't stay there. You need your time to grieve, yes. But what happens when you stay there too long? New mindsets, new behaviors, new patterns start to develop. And then this happens. When we isolate, we insulate. So we isolate ourselves from everyone. We cut ourselves off, and then we insulate ourselves to protect what we've just done by creating new mindsets. The church is just a bunch of hypocrites. I'll pick on the church. They're all about this. So they're all, and we find all of the problems, and we become this new criticizer. And we are this great fault finder, and we make good reasoning for why we don't need to be a part of that community. And you could apply it to every situation, but I'm just, as a pastor, applying it to the church that way. And so we need to understand that we can't run away from everybody. That's not how God has divinely divined us as people. Watch what Ecclesiastes says. 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. The enemy loves to isolate you from the herd. He likes to separate you from the flock so that he can begin to work and move in your life. Go read 1 Peter chapter 5, right? He is waiting, looking to separate you. He's looking, this is so good when you catch it, when you read 1 Peter chapter 5. How many know it says, the enemy walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Previous to that, he says, I know all of you been saying, he goes, you're suffering with brothers all around the world. It's when you're suffering that he wants to separate you. Because when you're suffering, when you're going through the troubles and the trials, and you're in that tribulation package, it's the all-inclusive. You got it all, right? When you're in it, you feel like nobody understands you. Nobody sees you. Nobody can relate to you. Everybody seems to have it better than you. And that's when the enemy gets up in our head. And it works like this. If the enemy can get a foothold, like, you know how if you got your hands full of the groceries, right, and the door's about to close and you can't get it, and you try to just get your foot in there, Gotta be careful, I'll fall and you'll be laughing at me. But you get if he can just get his foot in the door, and then it can become a stronghold. A foothold becomes a stronghold. And he'll use the trials and troubles to get into our life. The stress. That's how he wants to break us down. He wants to break you down, but that's not our year, right? We're going to learn more skills so that we can handle what we're going to face. So when life falls apart, don't run from God and people, run to it. Now, I'm not saying you just run to everybody and tell everybody everything, but find a trusted confidant that's going to trust what you're going to say. Somebody that's going to be able to tell you the word. Somebody that's going to be able to not just hyper-spiritualize the situation, but that's going to get down in there and get muddy in the situation. We're going to pray. We're going to trust God. We're going to believe the Lord. I'm going to walk through you with it. And I'll be one of the 4 boys or the 3 boys that went into the fire. And whether God brings us out or he don't, right? Then I'm going to believe that the Lord will bring me through. So we're going to do it together, right? So when life falls apart, don't run from God, run to people. The good news, the bad news is that I can't control everything around me, but the good news is I can run to God. Second thing is the sorrow. See, Paul dealt with a lot of great pain and sorrow. And I set us up already when Paul and Silas were in prison dealing with the sorrow and the pain and the moments. Like we just get a little snippet, but you can't tell me there wasn't a moment. We're like, God, you told me to come over here. I got the word. You told me. We just get, he just walked right in there and started praising him. But I just think humanity tells me something different. I think there were moments when he had to talk with God and he had to work through his frustrations. Paul wasn't this person who he was this spiritual thing that he just walked around and nothing ever bothered him. No, he got so bothered with the woman that was irritating him, he turns around and casts out a devil, right? There were things that bothered him. He dealt with some stuff. So I guarantee you there was a moment in that jail when the lights were out and it was dark and the rats were running around his feet and it was cold and it was wet. He was like, this is what you called me to do? Oh, how am I supposed to tell somebody about you in here? What are you going to do now? But they had to make a willful decision. Then in the moments of sorrow that they began to sing out to God, they began to worship. They began to just put God in that light where they would just begin to let him shine as great as he really is. When they were overwhelmed, when they were just frustrated, they would worship their way through it. Because worship does this. Worship reminds me that God is bigger than my problem. In both services today, I wanted to take a moment. I told myself I'm going to come in, I'm going to kneel down because I'm going to posture myself before you. And I want to remind myself that I want to keep a heart posture of surrender and submission to you when I can kneel before God. I don't want to ever become so whatever in my faith journey that I forget to kneel down and just remind myself that he's God and I'm not. I need you. I don't care how many of these things I get figured out. I just want to always remind myself that it's God who strengthens me to do this. I don't ever want to get to that place where, oh, look how much I'm carrying. I don't want to carry stuff. I'm tired of carrying stuff. I can't carry your problems. You can't carry mine. Bad news, I can't control everything that's happening around us, but the good news is I can worship my way through it. All of my life, you have been faithful. Come on, we can sing about the goodness of God. And there's moments when I have to go into my room when I'm dealing with something that might be trying to weigh me down, and I just need to put on some music, and I just got to begin to worship. Sometimes I just need some time. I'm coming to my room, don't let nobody come in, whatever it is. You can do that too. Third thing is struggle. This is where we start asking questions. Man, we struggle. We're wrestling. We don't get it. We don't understand why. We don't understand the timing of it. Then what happens is we're like, where are you, God? Where were you, God? If you this, if you that. We start blaming. We blame others. We blame the situation. We blame the spouse. We blame the husband, the wife. We blame all the things. This is why I'm upset. I'm upset because you... Wait a minute. I'm upset because you did this. I can't handle myself right now because you did this. Or perhaps I need to get some more skills so that when you do that, I can handle myself. I don't have to slap everybody that says something I don't like. Come, you with me, right? I literally put a Purpose Church sticker on the back of my window to remind me that when somebody cuts me off on airline, don't do anything stupid, Dusty, because you got a church sticker on the back. You laugh at me, but that's a skill. That's a skill because it keeps me accountable. You do you. I know I can get provoked. I'm just telling you that. So I got to work on me. All right, you good there? Okay. So, but look at Jeremiah. Some of you are going to connect right here. Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 18, and it'll be on the screen. Jeremiah's like, why was I ever born? My entire life has been filled with one problem after another. I wake up, it's problems. I go to bed, and it's problems. I can't even sleep without problems. AC's out now, right? Like, I mean, it's something, right? He's like, my whole life. You've been there. I'd be better off. I'd be better off. We struggle. We wrestle with it. It overwhelms us. So we stay stuck, though. We get stuck in our struggle. What should happen, though, when we get to the end of the story, we get to all of these people are like, how in the world did they get through that? How in the world can they handle that? There ain't no way that I could go through it like that. When people, I don't know how people get through certain things when they love a loved one, or when a loved one, they lose their life, or a child or something. I'm like, and some people never get over it. But I wonder sometimes how, I know the difference between Christians when they really give God their struggle, because they're able to pick up and think, just because, I'm not saying things will ever be the same. I'm not saying that you'll ever be able to replace certain things, but somehow you're able to keep moving forward. Somehow you're able to keep doing something that you never thought you'd be able to do before. Jesus struggled on the cross. There was a moment where he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? There was moments when even in his humanity, he didn't understand everything that's going on. Why did it have to go this way? Why did it have to hurt that bad? Why do I have to hang here this long? Right? Maybe they could have just broken one of my bones and got this thing over quicker, but why do we got to do it that way? Why do we have to have Isaiah prophesy and say not one of his bones to be broken? Like, get it over with. I'm just saying. Like, these are the prophetic words. Jesus knew he had to fulfill these. But when you struggle, can I tell you, remind yourself that God is working in ways that you don't know. I have to thank God for things. He has done things in my life that I'll never know until I get to eternity. He's kept me from things that I never knew he was keeping me from. He was working and putting things together, doing things around the corner, and I didn't even know he was there. I'm just saying, like, that's faith. That's not hyper faith. I'm just saying, I know God is working behind the scenes. I know God is involved in my life because that's the word. And and I say it like this because I'm setting you up for this. I'm not the prosperity preacher that's going to say you're never going to go through anything. You already heard that. You're going to go through stuff. I'm making that very clear. But what I have come to understand as being a person who's a man of faith and a man of word, that I know no matter what I face, God is working nonstop in my life. Nonstop in my life. You say, where do you get that? How many of you have ever read the entire chapter 11 of Hebrews? Hebrews chapter 11, Hall of Faith, whatever you want to call it, Heroes of Faith. It literally starts and it moves through how God just moved in extraordinary ways. He delivered. He took Daniel out of the lions, He moved for Abraham. He did this for David. He did that for this one. He did this one for that one. And then all of a sudden you get to the end of the chapter and you read this. God did it for Daniel, but others were tortured. Now, we'll do this. God did it for him. He's going to do it for me. God did it for Abraham. He's going to do it for me. But others were tortured. Some had marks beat in their back. Some were hung upside down. Some were cut in two. Some were killed by a sword. Some were burned at the stake. Others got this. Some got that. I don't know. I don't know how some got that and some didn't get this. All I know is this. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. All I can tell you this morning is that I don't know whether God's going to bring you out of it, but I know this, God will bring you through it. I just know. Go read Isaiah chapter 43, verses 1 and 2. He says, when you pass through the waters, I'll be with you, and through the rivers, they won't overflow you. And through the fires, when you walk through them, you're not going to be burned. You're going to go through it. But we good Christians, we're really good at praying for God to take me out of things, instead of saying, God, just bring me through whatever it is that I face. Because I know if God brings me to it, He'll bring me through it. I just know it. I know it, I know it, I know it. Bad news, I can't control everything that's happening around me. Good news is I can trust in God's promise. I can trust those things. Surrender. Now, this is the stage where we start to heal. We got to learn to trust, though. If you're going to surrender, I got to trust. I'm speaking to Dusty. You do what you want with what I'm about to talk to myself about. I surrendered my kids to the Lord. I surrendered my wife to the Lord. I surrendered my home to the Lord. I surrendered this church to the Lord. I surrender my life to the Lord. I surrender my finances to the Lord, because as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And the way that I serve the Lord is through surrender. It's not a popular word in our culture, but when I surrender, I let God come in. And what I do is this, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways, right? Acknowledge him. And watch this. He will direct your paths. So it doesn't always make sense. I tithe. I teach tithing. I believe it's a biblical principle. I believe in putting God first in everything that I do, right? And so it doesn't make sense on paper to give 10%. We give more than that. It doesn't make any sense, but that's what we do, right? 10% of everything. Even when I sell sports cards, I love my cards, I give 10%, right? I do this. And I believe that God does something. That's why Chick-fil-A isn't open on Sunday, right? That's why Hobby Lobby isn't open on Sunday. Because David Green, right? He believed, Hobby Lobby, that he could do more in 6, and he has. It doesn't make any sense. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your understanding. You got it. Right? The Apostle Paul knew that his peace was tied to him trusting God. You got to trust God. I can't control everything around me. I can control how I respond, though. How many of you are familiar with the serenity prayer? Have you ever heard of that? I bet most of you are familiar with this part of it. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's what most of you are familiar with, but how many know there's a second part to it? Anybody familiar with the second part? Second part says this: living one day at a time, accepting one moment at a time, accepting hardships, watch this, as the pathway to peace. Are you serious? Hardships as a pathway to peace? It almost doesn't even make any sense. Watch this now. Trusting that he will make all things right if you'll surrender, he'll make things right. Many of you are fighting battles you were never called to fight. You got stones in your hand that you were supposed to lay down. Let God fight your battles. He can't fight if you're out there fighting. Many of you are trying to handle people thinking that you're the one that really does wrestle against flesh and blood. No, you're trying to fight things you weren't called to fight. I can't control what's happening around me, but I can trust God. Sanctification. This is where God uses what we experience to teach us, develop us, and build my faith. For later, put it in your notes, go read James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. How he uses trials and troubles to build your faith. I'm going to give you Romans chapter 5, verse 3 and 4 for today, because both of them seem a little wacky. James says, count it all joy. Paul says we can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials. That's not usually how we respond, but Christians are different. Right? For we know that they help us develop. When I go through it, they're going to help. They give me opportunity to grow. How many of you know situations don't have to break us if you allow God to shape you? You didn't learn your greatest lessons from your mountaintop experiences. You learned them from the road up there. We learn our greatest lessons through the most difficult things that we experience. I learned don't stick a fork in the outlet because I did it, right? Mom told me not to touch that little red orangish circle on top of the thing we call a stove because she said it's going to burn you. I didn't know until I touched it, right? Like, it sounds stupid, but I play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I get all that. I won some stupid prizes in life, but I've learned some lessons, right? But we learn through our greatest moments of struggle. Some of us, though, we're not learning, and so that's why we feel stuck. We can't handle level 5 yet. We want level 5, but we haven't mastered 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right? How many remember Karate Kid? Wax on, wax off, right? Why am I doing this? New Karate Kid. Hang the coat up, take the coat off, right? Why am I doing this? Once you learn some of those basic things, then you can put them into action. Again, bad news is I can't control everything around us, but I can learn from my struggles. Can I invite the worship team to join me as we close? Last one is service. What I'm going through can help others. I want to jump to a point here that I didn't say it this way in the first service, but everyone needs meaningful work. Everyone needs a community to do a meaningful work together. And everyone needs to learn from the things that we've gone through so that we can help others in our community. Come on, guys, I need some of you to learn some of the lessons you're supposed to be learning so that you can help me. There's things I need help with, right? Like, I'm not perfect up here. Don't put me on a pedestal. I'm trying to figure some stuff out. Others are depending on us to learn these lessons. I'm trying to motivate you with that, right? Like, we need to learn these things. Watch 2 Corinthians 1:4 unfold in front of us. Paul says, God, he comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort others. Pause. Why did I tell you a minute ago that God is always working behind the scenes even when I don't see him? Because the Bible just told me that he comforts us in all of our troubles, yet some of us don't experience the comfort in our troubles, but the Bible is telling us that he does. Maybe I'm just not allowing him to comfort me because I'm doing things I shouldn't be doing. Paul said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Maybe I'm not allowing God to strengthen me through it. Thank you for watching Purpose Church YouTube channel. Before you go, would you hit the like and subscribe button to stay up on what's happening at Purpose Church? And make sure to share today's message with your friends and your family. If you'd like to support the ministries of Purpose Church, you can click the link in the comment section. And make sure to join us live on Sundays at 10:30 a.m.